The American Civil War broke out, and clashes broke out between the people and the police who maintained order over water issues. The woman in the corner hugged the Standard Cup and ran towards the rioting crowd holding a heart-full flag. The woman then detonated the bomb in her backpack, causing numerous casualties to the surrounding people and the police who were maintaining order. The Manchu flag that once represented freedom and democracy has now become a symbol of terror. At this time, the President of the United States was giving an impassioned speech. He proudly announced that the rebel army Siberia, composed of Texas and California, had been severely hit, and the federal government would once again unify the United States. Damei, a senior war correspondent in New York, was watching the president's performance through the screen. When the president said, "God bless America," a huge mushroom cloud rose in the distance outside the window. And when Damei looked out the window, the TV picture reflected on the glass also showed how false the president's speech was. The next day, Damei and his colleague Xiongda drove to a protest site in New York City. Protesters clashed fiercely with the police, which attracted many media reporters to report first. Damei also met Xiaomei, who is also a reporter. With years of keen observation as a war correspondent, Damei saved Xiaomei's life at a critical moment. After the explosion, Damei did not run away, but raised the camera in her hand to take pictures of the tragic scene. Xiaomei also recorded this moment of Damei's work, and the bond between the two began. After returning to the hotel, Damei soaked in the bathtub and wanted to relax her tense nerves, but all that flashed in her mind were the various cruel scenes she had captured. She is just a recorder, showing people the cruelty of war. The next day, when Damei was about to leave for Washington, when she arrived at the hotel door, she found that Xiaomei had also joined the team. In this way, a group of 4 people embarked on a journey to Washington to see the president for the last time. In an abandoned building 875 miles away from Washington, a conflict broke out between U.S. government troops and rebel armed forces. A few people from Damei followed the ranks of the rebel armed forces and took photos to record everything that happened in this war. After several fierce gun battles, the U.S. government troops were eventually captured by the rebel armed forces. Xiaomei, who had just witnessed the battle, squatted in the corner, watching silently as they decompressed the prisoners and passed by, and then recorded it all indifferently with her camera. And in places that her camera didn't capture, the bodies of prisoners were still being shot wildly. Then everyone embarked on the journey again. Not long after, they came to a Christmas town and saw this weird scene. A soldier's body lay in the middle of the road, but holiday decorations were placed on both sides of the road. Just when they were hesitating to move forward, a bullet was suddenly fired from a distance. Xiongda was forced to drive away from the corpse. After driving the car to a bunker, everyone got out of the car in a panic. Only then did they realize that there were 2 snipers on their right, fighting against the snipers who were shooting at them from a distance. Xiongda found the opportunity and rushed over. When asked about which side's orders the 2 men were following, one of the observers calmly stated that there were no orders and that they simply wanted to kill the other side. As for who the other side shot at them, whether it was friendly fire or a hostile force, it doesn't matter now. They just want to send the other side to see God. At this time, the mentality of Damei and Xiaomei was also quietly changing. Xiaomei is no longer afraid of gunfire and killings, and calmly snaps the next photo. As a senior war reporter, Damei put down the camera in her hand and lay on the ground admiring the wild flowers that had never appeared in her lens. After the snipers cleared the obstacles, the 4 continued to move forward, and met 2 people, Tony and Xiaohai, who were walking in each other's way. Tony and Xiaomei also swapped each other's vehicles. Xiaohai drove Xiaomei all the way. While Damei and others were moving forward at the same speed, after driving for a while, Damei and others saw Xiaohai's car, but it was empty at this time. It turns out that Xiaomei and Xiaohai are being held hostage by 2 unidentified soldiers, and behind them is a truckload of corpses of civilians, who are being buried in the pit. So several people discussed that the old man should stay in the car. Damei, Xiongda and Tony went to the scene and tried to persuade the other party to let him go as reporters. The leader wearing tinted glasses learned after some communication that several of them were reporters. but he didn't care about the identities of Damei and his group, and casually executed Xiao Hai, who had an Asian complexion. Then he asked Damei and others calmly where they were from and whether they were pure Americans. He didn't seem to want to let anyone go. Sure enough, when a conflict breaks out, Laos and the United States will adhere to the One China principle. No matter whether you are Taiwan independence or Hong Kong independence, in the eyes of Lao America, everything will be handled as Chinese people. Fortunately, the old man arrived in time with his car and knocked the group of soldiers into the corpse pit. Xiao Mei, who was affected by the impact, also fell in. The vast majority of the dead in the pits were non-whites, and racial discrimination has not been completely eliminated in the United States. This group of soldiers are just white supremacists who want to take advantage of the civil unrest and massacre. The American Civil War broke out in full force, and the Lincoln Memorial was surrounded by rebels. After a stalemate between the two sides, the rebels took out a rocket launcher and fired a rocket at the Lincoln Memorial. Smoke filled the reception room, the Lincoln Memorial fell, and rebel fighter planes joined the battlefield, shooting at residential buildings regardless of friend or foe. As war reporters, Damei and others squatted in the corner to find the right opportunity to snap photos of the scene. After a series of bombings by fighter jets, the rebels are getting closer and closer to occupying the White House. And the government troops are at the end of their game. The rebels adjusted their tactics and arranged for armored vehicles to move forward to cover the advance of the infantry. The three people from Damei also followed a small team and slowly headed towards the White House under the cover of armored vehicles. Every few steps a rocket hit, hitting an armored vehicle in front of Xiao Mei. The armored vehicle covering Xiao Mei retreated back, which also exposed Xiao Mei and others to enemy gunfire. But Xiao Mei did not evacuate quickly, but risked her life to take a few photos. Fortunately, Xiongda pulled Xiao Mei back in time. At this time, the support troops arrived with tanks and destroyed the small bunker in front of the White House with one shot. Under the cover of tanks, the rebels marched straight into the White House and prepared to kill the president. The Secret Service fought desperately to protect the president, but the Secret Service was no match for professional soldiers, and a few agents fell one after another. Xiao Mei, who couldn't wait to take the photo, once again exposed herself in the center of the crossfire between the two sides. At this time, Damei noticed the threat and rushed forward and pushed Xiao Mei away without hesitation. Damei was unfortunately shot as a result, but Xiao Mei, who should have been frightened and overwhelmed, calmly raised her camera and captured the moment of Damei's death. Some people may think that it was Xiao Mei's recklessness that killed Damei. But I think it was Damei's own choice. The killings and injuries along the way, instead of numbing her, made her think, when misfortune happens in front of her again and again, is absolute neutrality really what she wants? At this moment, the President of the United States was dragged out from under his desk like an animal by the rebels. Xiongda stepped forward to ask the President to say his last words. The President, who had repeatedly made righteous speeches on TV, was now afraid of death and raised the curtain. Xiongda stood up in disappointment, and Xiao Mei also raised the camera again. The ultimate goal of Damei's trip was to photograph the president. Now this wish has been realized by Xiao Mei. But the president under the camera is already a corpse. Looking back at Damei's transformation again, from the indifferent record of facing the explosion scene, to the silent suffering in the hotel bathtub, to the confusion in front of the White House, Damei gradually realized that this seemingly objective and calm record is actually a kind of cruelty. She no longer wanted to record the loss of similar lives. In the end, she chose not to abide by professional rules and rushed over to push Xiao Mei away because she wanted to save what she could. Sadly, however, in today's increasingly chaotic and torn world, there are still only a few